I was 19 years old, a soldier in uniform, but in that moment standing in the living room of my childhood home in Waco, Texas, I was nothing more than a target for my brother Jacob Carter's rage. The afternoon sun bled through the blinds, casting long stripes of gold and shadow across the Persian rug our mother prized more than either of her children. Donna Carter sat in her armchair with her arms folded, her eyes sharp and cold, as if waiting for a verdict to be delivered. My father, Harold, was absent as always, hiding in his garage or drowning himself in the glow of the television. The argument had started small, a complaint about money the way they always did in this house. I had come home from Fort Hood proud of the independence I was building with my soldier's pay and determined to invest in a used car of my own. Jacob sneered when I told him. He wanted my allowance for himself, and when I refused, he leaned forward, his tall frame casting a long shadow over me. "You think you're better than me because you wear a uniform," he hissed. "You think the Army makes you special. You're just a kid playing soldier." I told him calmly it was my money earned by my own work and I would not hand it over. That was the spark. In a flash, his fist moved faster than my eyes could follow, and pain like a thunderclap exploded across my face. The sound was sickening, a crack deep in my jaw, followed by a white flash behind my eyes. The taste of copper filled my mouth warm and heavy as blood spilled past my lips. My legs buckled. I stumbled backward, clutching at nothing as if the air itself might save me. I fell hard against the rug, my cheek pressed against its intricate design that my mother always insisted we never stain. And in that twisted instant, as my breath rattled and tears burned unbidden, I thought absurdly that she would care more about the rug than the girl bleeding on top of it. My brother stood over me, his chest heaving, his eyes bright with fury, and something else darker, a satisfaction that he had finally put me in my place. He growled through clenched teeth, "Maybe now you'll keep your filthy mouth shut." I could not answer. My jaw screamed with pain, every nerve lit up in fire. But the silence in the room was worse than the blow, because in that silence my mother's voice came smooth, cold, deliberate. "Now you'll learn to shut that filthy mouth." She did not gasp. She did not cry out. She did not move to stop him. She simply pronounced judgment as though she were a judge handing down a sentence. Her words cut deeper than his fist ever could. I was her daughter, yet, in that moment, I was nothing more than a nuisance, an inconvenience, a casualty of her allegiance to her son. Blood dripped from my lip onto the rug, and I tried to push myself up. My arms trembled, my vision blurred. Jacob smirked and shook his hand as though the act had been nothing more than brushing dust from his knuckles. Donna crossed one leg over the other, perfectly composed, and repeated with a faint curl of contempt in her voice, "Do not get blood on the rug, Natalie. That Persian rug cost more than you will ever be worth." The words hollowed me out, but somewhere beneath the humiliation and the agony, a spark began to burn. I had been hit before, shoved, insulted, dismissed, but something about the sound of bone cracking inside my head and the sight of my own mother choosing a rug over her child forged a new truth. I would never beg them again. I would never kneel again. I would never bleed for their approval again. My heart pounded as though trying to hammer courage into my chest. I forced myself upright, blood streaking down my chin. Jacob expected me to cry, expected me to collapse, expected me to retreat upstairs in silence as I had done so many times before. Instead, I stood swaying but defiant. Our eyes locked. In his, I saw rage and disbelief. In mine, he must have seen something new, a soldier, not a sister, a fighter, not a victim. I whispered through the pain, my jaw barely moving. "You have no idea what you've started." Donna dismissed me with a wave of her manicured hand as if swatting a fly. "You brought this on yourself," she said. My knees trembled, but I refused to fall. I took a single step toward the staircase, leaving behind a small trail of red droplets that marked every inch of the floor. Each step was agony, but each step was also a vow. They thought they had silenced me. They thought this was the end. It was not. It was the beginning. If you have ever felt silenced by family, if you have ever been told your voice was worthless, drop a simple yes in the comments. You are not alone. And as I climbed those stairs, jaw-throbbing blood still warm on my chin, I swore with every ounce of strength I had left that I would never again be their victim. Whatever they thought they had destroyed, they had only awakened something far stronger. I would not kneel. I would not shut my mouth. I would fight back. And when the time came, the whole world would see what they had done. The Carter house in Waco, Texas had always felt less like a home and more like a courtroom. Every wall carried the evidence of who mattered most and who did not. On the left wall of the living room hung Jacob's high school football photographs framed in polished wood, each with a brass plate that read Most Valuable Player or All-State Recognition. His smile beamed from every frame, even though he had dropped out of community college and never held a steady job. On the right wall, shelves sagged under the weight of trophies, ribbons, and plaques, all engraved with his name. By contrast, my own achievements were invisible. My Army certificate of completion was stuffed into a drawer. My photograph from basic training had been hidden in the hallway closet behind cleaning supplies. My uniform never hung in the open. Donna insisted the house should reflect pride, and pride meant Jacob, not me. That was the environment I returned to whenever I came home from Fort Hood. Sitting at the dinner table in that house was like standing before a tribunal. Donna presided with the authority of a judge, her eyes scanning for flaws in my posture, in my words, in the way I chewed. Jacob lounged across from me like the favored son, a smug grin playing on his lips, as if he already knew the verdict. My father, Harold, sat at the far end of the table, half present his fork, moving mechanically through food, his eyes darting toward the television in the other room whenever the conversation grew sharp. He was the kind of man who measured his peace by how well he avoided conflict, and in our home that meant pretending not to hear what was happening. The meals followed the same ritual. Donna asked Jacob about his day, even though he spent it sleeping or playing video games. She praised him for minor errands, calling him responsible for mowing half the lawn or taking the car to the mechanic. Then she turned to me and narrowed her gaze. "So, Natalie, when are you leaving the Army?" she asked once again. "The Army is no place for a girl." I clenched my fork and answered evenly. "It is not a place for boys either, Mom. It is for soldiers, and I am one." Her lips thinned. Jacob chuckled and muttered, "Something tells me you only got in because they were desperate." Donna laughed softly at his remark as if it were clever. That was how it always went. My presence at the table served as the punchline to their jokes. They did not see a daughter who had survived grueling training or earned a place in one of the most disciplined organizations in the world. They saw a girl who refused to stay in her lane. They saw betrayal. I thought of Fort Hood, where order reigned, and where every action was measured by discipline and respect. The contrast between that base and this house could not have been sharper. At Fort Hood, I was Private First Class Natalie Carter, treated as part of a unit. In Waco, I was just Natalie, the disappointing daughter, the inconvenient sister. The weight of the house pressed down like a suffocating blanket. The Persian rug stretched across the living room like a relic of some ancient dynasty. Donna polished it twice a week and warned us never to stain it. The rug became her altar proof that she cared more for woven fabric than for flesh and blood. When Jacob hit me and I fell onto it, I understood the symbolism. In this house, I was not the daughter. I was the stain. As I sat there at the table, jaw aching from the night before, the silence between us stretched heavy. Donna sipped her tea and eyed me as though calculating how much longer she would have to tolerate my presence. Jacob tore into his steak, his smirk never fading. I wanted to scream that their court was a sham, that their verdicts had no power over me. But I also knew something deeper. To defeat them, I could not fight with the same weapons they used. They thrived on humiliation, manipulation, control. I would have to fight differently, smartly. The walls around me carried their story, but soon enough the world would see mine. That evening, as the sun dipped low over the Brazos River and the cicadas began their song, I stood in the hallway and looked once more at the photographs on the wall. Jacob's grinning face lined up like soldiers in their own right, each frame a declaration of who mattered. I touched the closet door where my own picture lay hidden. The air smelled of lemon polish and dust. In that moment, I swore to myself that one day these walls would no longer tell only Jacob's story. They would bear witness to mine. The tension that had simmered in the Carter household finally boiled over one sticky May afternoon when I returned from Fort Hood with a small envelope tucked in my duffel bag. Inside were savings from my military pay money I had worked hard to set aside for a car that would give me independence from the suffocating walls of Waco. Donna noticed the envelope first when I set it down on the kitchen counter, and Jacob's eyes followed like a predator tracking prey. He asked me what it was, and I told him honestly. I was saving for a car. His laugh was sharp and cutting. A car, with what money, he mocked. That's family money. My jaw tightened. No, Jacob, it's army money. It's mine. He stepped closer, his breath sour with cheap beer, and jabbed a finger into my shoulder. You think because you wear boots and bark orders at some base that you're better than me? You're not. You're just a kid playing soldier. His words echoed not because they were new, but because they were the same refrain he had thrown at me since I left for training. Donna leaned against the counter with her arms crossed, her silence granting him permission. My father was in the garage, the sound of tools clinking faint through the walls, as if he chose bolts and screws over flesh and blood. Jacob's voice rose. That money should go to the family. To me. I'm the man here. I'm the one who deserves it. I tried to keep my tone, even though my pulse raced. Jacob, I earned it. Every cent. You can't just take it. His face darkened, the smug grin dissolving into something uglier. You think you can talk back to me? In his world, talking back was a crime, and I had just crossed the line. The moment stretched thin, like glass ready to shatter. I could see the shift in his stance, the tightening of his fists, the way his shoulders squared. I knew what was coming, yet nothing could prepare me for the force of it. His fist came fast, a blur that slammed into my jaw with a crack so loud it drowned the ticking of the wall clock. Pain ripped through me, white hot and searing as if my skull itself had split. My teeth rattled, blood filled my mouth, metallic and bitter, spilling past my lips. The room tilted, and I collapsed onto the Persian rug, my cheek pressed against its intricate weave. The rug smelled of lemon polish and dust, absurdly clean against the reality of my bleeding face. For a heartbeat, all I could hear was the rush of my own pulse, the roaring in my ears. My body shook with the shock of impact, and I struggled to breathe past the stabbing agony in my jaw. Jacob stood above me, chest heaving, knuckles red. The smirk returned, this time twisted with satisfaction. Maybe now you'll shut up. His voice dripped with triumph, as though breaking me was his greatest accomplishment. But it was not his voice that crushed me most. It was hers. From the armchair, Donna's voice cut across the silence. Calm, precise, cruel. Now you'll learn to shut that filthy mouth. She didn't move to help me. She didn't flinch at the sight of her daughter sprawled on the rug. She didn't scold her son. She simply delivered her verdict. My vision blurred, tears mixing with blood as humiliation seared deeper than pain. I tried to push myself up, my arms trembling under the weight of my body. The taste of iron choked me, and every movement sent another shockwave of agony through my jaw. Jacob chuckled and shook his hand as if dismissing the act as a simple chore finished. Donna sipped her tea, her eyes cold and detached. Do not bleed on the rug, Natalie. That rug is worth more than you will ever be. Her words carved into me sharper than any fist. I realized then that in this house my worth was measured against objects, against Jacob's trophies, against the Persian rug, and I always came last. My breath caught, and I thought of Fort Hood, of the way my fellow soldiers treated each other as equals, as part of a unit. Here in Waco, I was not part of a family. I was an intruder in their shrine to Jacob. The clock ticked on, marking each second of silence that screamed louder than any shout. Jacob loomed, daring me to rise again so he could knock me down once more. Donna's gaze never wavered, content to let her son prove his dominance. The cruelty of her composure made the room colder than any winter. My heart pounded in my ears, my body shaking from the blow, but somewhere deep beneath the pain a seed took root. This was no longer just about survival. This was about defiance. As I staggered to my knees, blood dripping onto the rug, I saw Jacob's grin falter. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I was supposed to stay down. I was supposed to whimper and retreat. Instead, I rose unsteady but unbroken, my eyes locking with his. Through swollen lips, I whispered words I barely managed to form. "You cannot silence me forever." Donna's lips curved in disdain, dismissing my words like smoke in the air. "You brought this on yourself," she said, her tone flat as a gavel striking wood. In that moment, clarity burned through the haze of pain. They had declared me worthless, but in truth, they had just declared war. I knew the road ahead would be brutal. I knew this was not the last blow. But as I turned away from them and began to climb the stairs, leaving a crimson trail across the floor, I carried with me a promise. They thought this was the end of my voice. They had no idea it was only the beginning. I dragged myself up the stairs one slow step at a time, each movement a battle against gravity and the fire blazing through my jaw. My hand clutched the banister slick with sweat, the wood biting into my palm as though even the house itself wanted me gone. Jacob's laughter echoed faintly from below, Donna's cold voice humming like a verdict in my ears. By the time I reached my bedroom, I was trembling, the air in my lungs sharp as glass. I slammed the door shut and twisted the lock, a hollow click that felt like the first line of defense I had drawn in years. My room was small, plain, a soldier's space compared to the curated luxury downstairs. I stumbled toward the bathroom and flipped on the vanity lights. The brightness seared my eyes, but I forced myself to stare into the mirror. What looked back at me wasn't Natalie Carter, the daughter. It wasn't even Private First Class Carter. It was a casualty. My left cheek was swollen grotesquely, the skin already purpling. My lower lip split and raw blood trailing down my chin. My eyes were wide red and furious. For a moment, I wanted to cry to let the pain collapse me. But training drilled into my bones roared to life. Assess the situation, secure the perimeter, establish communication. Soldier mode. I reached into the cabinet for the small first aid kit I always carried from base, a habit my family mocked as paranoid. Tonight, it was my lifeline. My hands shook as I opened antiseptic wipes and pressed them to my mouth. The sting was savage, but I gritted my teeth through it. I wrapped gauze across the cut and packed ice from the bathroom freezer unit into a cloth. My reflection looked like a stranger, half-soldier, half-broken doll. Still, I whispered to the mirror, "You're alive. You're standing. That's enough." Next step document. I pulled out my phone, unlocked it, and set it to record. The tremor in my fingers steadied as discipline took over. I lifted the camera and forced myself to look straight into the lens. My voice was low, steady, stripped of emotion. Private First Class, Natalie Carter. 2100 hours, assaulted by Jacob Carter inside family residence, Waco, Texas. I shifted the phone to capture every angle, the swelling, the bleeding, the bruises forming like violent blossoms across my face. I turned the camera to show the door, the bloodstains on the hallway floor. Each image was not just memory, it was evidence. I saved the file and uploaded it to a secure encrypted cloud server Elena had built for me months ago, a backup plan we joked I would never need. Tonight, that foresight was salvation. The progress bar inched across the screen, and when the upload finished, a weight lifted off my chest. Even if they destroyed my phone, the truth existed somewhere beyond their reach. The next step was communication. I scrolled through my contacts until I reached one letter E, Elena Martinez. We had agreed long ago on a code for the unthinkable, a phrase lifted from military jargon. My thumb hovered for only a second before pressing call. She answered on the first ring, her voice sharp and alert, despite the late hour. I forced the words out, jaw aching with every syllable. "Elena, this is Carter." Empty quiver, silence on the line, a half-second of shock, then her tone shifted to crisp efficiency. "Understood. Disable all trackers. Fall back to safe location Bravo. ETA 30 minutes. The line went dead. Extraction was in motion. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my body vibrating with adrenaline. Soldier mode had kept me moving, but the cost was creeping in. My jaw throbbed in time with my heartbeat, and every breath rattled my ribs. I leaned back against the wall and closed my eyes. For a fleeting second, I was back on base during field exercises learning how to stabilize a casualty, how to hold steady when chaos erupted around you. Only this time the casualty was me. Downstairs, I heard faint movement, the creak of floorboards, Donna's measured steps. She didn't knock. She didn't ask if I was breathing. She passed by like I was already gone. That indifference burned worse than the injury. But the soldier in me filed it away. Every cruelty, every neglect, every sneer was evidence. And evidence was ammunition. Minutes crawled like hours until a quiet buzz reached my phone. A text from Elena. Outside. Back gate. Move now. I gathered what little I could duffel bag ID. The envelope of money still stained with a fleck of my blood. I paused at the door listening. Silence. I unlocked it and slipped into the hall, every nerve alert. The house was dark shadows stretching long. On the wall were framed photos, Jacob in Little League, Jacob at prom, Jacob standing next to Donna. My own achievements hidden away in drawers. The sight stoked a fury that steadied me. I crept down the back stairs and slid open the screen door. The night air hit my skin, cool and damp, carrying the scent of cut grass and gasoline from the garage. My heart hammered as I crossed the yard toward the gate. For a moment, I feared Jacob would appear from the dark fists ready again. But the gate opened, and there was Elena standing by her old Jeep with the engine idling. Her eyes scanned me once, catching the bruise, the swelling. She said nothing. She simply opened the door. "Get in." I climbed inside, clutching the duffel to my chest, and she pulled away without another word. The Carter house shrank in the rearview mirror, a glowing square of windows in the Texas night. I stared until it vanished behind the trees. My jaw ached, my body trembled, but inside me something sparked alive. They thought they had broken me. They had no idea they had just awakened the soldier. The hum of Elena's Jeep on the highway was a low, steady rhythm, but my mind was anything but calm. With every mile we put between ourselves and Waco, memories clawed their way out of the dark corners where I had buried them. I pressed the frozen peas Elena had handed me against my jaw, the cold biting into the swelling, and stared out the window at the blur of Texas night. It wasn't just tonight's blow that ached inside me. It was the weight of years, each moment of cruelty stacked one on top of the other until it collapsed on me like a house of cards. Soldier mode kept me focused on the present, but my mind pulled me backward. I was 10 years old the first time I understood my place in the Carter house. Jacob had been chosen for the all-star baseball team, and Donna had practically turned the living room into a shrine. Trophies lined the shelves, photos covered the walls, each smile of his immortalized. I had brought home a science fair ribbon that same week, proud and eager to share. I held it up at dinner, waiting for the smile, the word of praise. Donna's eyes flicked to the ribbon, then right back to Jacob, gushing about his swing, his potential, how coaches were already calling him special. My ribbon ended up tucked in a drawer. That night, I learned that my victories would never be theirs. At 16, the abuse turned physical. I can still feel the sharp edge of the staircase digging into my back. Jacob had shoved me because I wouldn't give him my allowance. I tumbled down half a flight, my arm bruised and breath knocked out. I lay there stunned, waiting for Donna to rush in to yell at him to check if I was okay. Instead, she appeared at the top of the stairs with a sigh that cut deeper than the fall. "Con gai thi phải nhân nhân," she muttered in Vietnamese accented English, the words she often used when she wanted me quiet. "Girls have to endure." She helped Jacob brush off his shirt as though he had been wronged, leaving me sprawled like an afterthought. The bruise faded, but the message stayed permanent. 18 brought a spark of hope. I had worked tirelessly for my dream acceptance into West Point's prep program. The letter arrived crisp and official, my name stamped on the future I had fought for. I remember standing in the kitchen trembling with pride, showing it to my parents. Harold, my father, gave a distracted nod before returning to a stack of papers from work. Donna's face tightened, her lips pressing into a line. Jacob didn't say a word at first. Later that night, I caught him outside holding the letter over the grill flames, licking at the edges. His grin was pure malice as he tossed it into the fire. "This is what I think of your dreams," he sneered. Donna came out onto the porch, saw the embers floating into the night, and instead of anger, she simply adjusted Jacob's collar. "He's just teasing you," she said, dismissing my tears as if they were theatrics. That night, I swore I would still find my way into uniform even if I had to crawl there. My memories twisted tighter, showing me the quieter cuts that left deeper scars. My high school graduation was supposed to be a milestone, but while my classmates' families clapped and cheered, mine slipped out halfway through. Donna claimed they had another commitment, a party with family friends. I scanned the crowd as my name was called, clutching my diploma, but their seats were empty. The cheers from strangers filled the air, but in my ears it was silence, a void that told me exactly how much I mattered. Even birthdays became battlegrounds. On my 17th, Donna organized a dinner. The cake was decorated with Jacob's favorite frosting, not mine. When I blew out the candles and whispered my wish, Jacob snickered. "Don't waste it on the army. You'll be back here before the year's out." Donna didn't correct him. She laughed. That laugh was worse than any slap. As Elena drove, I closed my eyes and the memories layered over one another. The house in Waco had always been a stage for humiliation. Jacob's tantrums were storms that everyone else navigated around. My father Harold was the ghost always slipping away to the garage, his tools clicking like excuses. He never raised a hand, but his silence was complicity. Every time he walked away, every time he chose not to see it, confirmed that my fight was mine alone. I thought of the day I left for basic training. My duffel was heavy on my shoulder, my heart light with anticipation. I wanted at least one proud smile, one hug. Donna barely looked up from her coffee, muttering that I was throwing away a future of stability. Jacob scoffed, "Go play soldier. See how long before you come crawling back." Harold handed me a set of car keys to the old sedan, but made no eye contact. The door closed behind me without fanfare. No farewell, no blessing. Just the sound of Jacob's laugh trailing after me like a curse. Those years had etched a map of scars invisible to others. They prepared the ground for tonight's blow, each cut paving the way for the fracture in my jaw. It wasn't sudden. It was inevitable. Abuse had been normalized in the Carter house, twisted into routine, wrapped in phrases like family loyalty and know your place. Every dismissal, every shove, every stolen victory had been bricks in a wall meant to keep me small. Tonight that wall collapsed under the weight of his fist. But as I stared out the Jeep's window, pressing ice to my swollen face, I realized something they never expected. They thought the blows would silence me. Instead, they forged me. Each memory, each flashback wasn't just pain. It was evidence. It was fuel. The girl they tried to diminish was gone. In her place was a soldier who understood her mission. The war had started long before tonight. This was simply the moment I chose to fight back. The Jeep rattled as Elena turned onto the interstate toward Austin. She glanced at me once, her eyes catching mine in the reflection of the windshield. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. She knew the past well enough. She had been the only one I had ever confessed small fragments to. Tonight, she saw the full cost written across my face. She reached over, resting her hand lightly on the duffel in my lap. "You're not alone anymore," she said, her voice quiet but firm. The words sliced through the fog of memories like a flare in darkness. I let the tears fall silently, each drop carrying years of buried hurt. But for the first time, those tears didn't feel like defeat. They felt like release. I leaned back, the hum of the engine steady, and let the memories settle not as chains, but as proof of survival. The chain of abuse had defined my childhood, but it would not define my future. That much I swore as Texas night opened wide before us. Elena's apartment in Austin was nothing like the Carter house in Waco, where my family home was pristine and suffocating a curated museum to Jacob's imagined greatness. Elena's place was alive with chaos and comfort. Stacks of books on cybersecurity teetered on the coffee table, half-finished mugs of coffee lined the counter, and a disassembled computer rig glowed faintly in the corner with blinking lights like a watchful sentinel. The walls were plastered with posters from music festivals and military memorabilia she had collected from friends who had served. It was messy, but it was safe. For the first time in hours, I allowed my shoulders to slump. She guided me to her worn leather couch, the springs creaking under my weight. Without a word, she disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bag of frozen peas wrapped in a towel. She placed it gently against my jaw, her movements efficient and precise, then set a glass of water in front of me. "Drink," she said simply. That was Elena. No empty words, no shallow questions, just action. The silence stretched, but it was not the suffocating silence of my parents. It was steady, expectant, a silence that gave me space to breathe. Finally, Elena leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes missing nothing. "Why now, Nat?" she asked. "Why not all the other times?" Her question pierced me deeper than Jacob's fist. Why now? Why not the staircase when I was 16? Why not the burned West Point letter? Why not the empty seats at graduation? I closed my eyes and felt the weight of those memories pressing down. Because this time, I said slowly, he broke more than my jaw. He broke the illusion that I could survive by keeping my head down. Tonight, I realized they won't stop until I'm nothing. My voice trembled but steadied with the truth. Elena nodded once, accepting my answer. She reached for her laptop, flipped it open, and began typing furiously. The glow illuminated her face, sharp angles softened by concentration. "Then we do this right," she murmured. "We turn their abuse into evidence, their silence into guilt." She looked at me, her mouth curving into the faintest of smiles. "Soldier, you're not fighting this war alone." The relief that washed over me was sharp and unexpected. For years, I had carried the burden alone, convinced no one would believe me, that no one cared. And here she was, treating my bruises like battle scars, my story like intelligence that demanded analysis. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds, harsh and honest. My jaw throbbed stiff and swollen, but my mind was clearer. Elena handed me coffee strong enough to jolt the dead awake. "We need to make this official," she said. "You can't just go AWOL. Hayes is going to notice." She was right. My phone buzzed minutes later with a call from Fort Hood. "Captain Michael Hayes." I hesitated, but Elena's steady gaze pushed me to answer. "Private Carter." His voice was firm, but tinged with concern. "Where are you?" I straightened instinctively, the soldier inside me rising. "Sir, I'm safe." I needed to remove myself from a dangerous situation. There was a pause on the line, the kind that told me he already suspected. "You've gone AWOL, Carter." "But I'm listening." What happened, I told him carefully, sparing no detail about the blow, about my mother's words, about the years that led to it. Silence again, then his tone shifted. "You did the right thing, calling Elena. I'll connect you with Major Kimberly Ross JAG Corps in San Antonio. She'll advise you." His voice steadied me. "We look out for our own." That phrase wrapped around me like armor. For the first time in my life, an authority figure wasn't dismissing me. He believed me. Within hours, Elena's apartment became a command center. She cleared space on the table wires, snaking across surfaces, screens flashing with code. "We need to lock down your communications," she said. "Your family will spin this. They'll try to make you unstable, unreliable." She wasn't wrong. That afternoon, Donna sent an email from her old school address. The subject line, "Our troubled daughter." My stomach turned as I read her carefully chosen words. "Natalie has been under great stress. Her military service has affected her mind. We as a family are trying to help her through this difficult time." It wasn't concern, it was character assassination wrapped in silk. Elena leaned over my shoulder, her eyes narrowing. "This isn't a letter. It's a bullet," she said. "Save it. We'll need it." Later, a package arrived by courier. Inside was a photo album filled with smiling childhood pictures, birthday cakes, Christmas mornings. Jacob's arm around me in staged poses. On top was a note in Donna's handwriting. "Remember how happy we were." "Come home, Natalie. Stop this." My chest tightened with rage. These weren't memories, they were weapons. Elena snapped the album shut and handed it back. Evidence, not nostalgia. Even Jacob tried. His voice slithered through the phone one evening, fake contrition coating every word. "Nat, I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. You know I'd protect you if you just came back." My jaw ached at the sound of him, the very same mouth that had split my face open. Elena recorded the call without a word. When it ended, she said, "Gaslighting 101. We'll catalog it." Then Major Ross arrived. She was nothing like the Carters. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, her presence filled Elena's small living room like a wall of steel. She sat across from me, her notebook open, pen poised. "Start from the beginning," she said, voice calm but commanding. I told her everything from the staircase to the gala plans Donna had mentioned. She didn't interrupt. She didn't doubt. She listened. When I finished, she leaned forward. "Private Carter in this room, you are not a daughter. You are a soldier who has been assaulted. The Army protects its own. We're going to build a case, and we're going to win." Her words landed with the weight of a promise. For the first time in 19 years, I wasn't alone in the fight. Elena, my hacker ally. Hayes, my captain. Ross, my legal shield. This was my squad, my chosen family. The Carters had broken my jaw. But with this team, I would break their power. The war that unfolded in the days after Major Ross took my statement was not fought with fists or bruises. It was fought with words, images, and carefully crafted lies. My family knew the truth was dangerous in my hands, so they set out to strip it away before it could breathe. Their first weapon came cloaked in kindness, or what passed for it in the Carter house. Donna's email landed in my inbox like a grenade, disguised as a bouquet. The subject line was innocent enough concerning our daughter, but the message inside dripped with poison. "Natalie has been suffering emotionally," she wrote. "Her service has put unbearable strain on her mind. Our family is united in supporting her through this difficult time. We ask the public to be compassionate and patient." Compassionate, patient. Words chosen not for me, but for the world that might one day read them. She wasn't offering me help. She was preparing a case framing me as unstable before I could speak. I read it aloud in Elena's apartment, my jaw throbbing as I forced the words out. Elena leaned over my shoulder, her face carved from stone. "This isn't love," she said flatly. "This is groundwork. They're setting you up as unreliable." She tapped the screen. "Save it. Archive it. It's evidence now." Major Ross, sitting across from us, nodded in grim agreement. "She's not your mother in this. She's opposing counsel." The next salvo was physical. A package arrived at Elena's door, tied neatly with a red ribbon. Inside was a leather photo album filled with glossy prints. Christmas mornings staged in front of the tree. Jacob's arm slung around my shoulder, his smile wide while mine was forced. Donna with her hands on both our shoulders, a perfect picture of maternal pride. A letter tucked inside smelled faintly of her perfume. "My dearest Natalie," it read in her delicate script. "Remember how happy we once were, before you turned against us. Come home. We can be that family again." My stomach twisted. The images were real, but the memories weren't. I remembered the sting of her words after those dinners, the way Jacob would shove me once the camera was put away. The photos weren't proof of happiness. They were camouflage for cruelty. My hands shook as I turned the pages. Maybe, the word slipped from my mouth before I could stop it. Maybe I was remembering wrong. Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe I was the problem. Elena snapped the album shut with a sharp clap. "No," she said, her voice like iron. "This is not memory. This is ammunition. Do not mistake the weapon for the truth." She handed the album to Ross, who slid it into her briefcase. "Chain of custody begins now," Ross said. "If they wanted this to be a prop, they've just handed us evidence of manipulation." But the Carters were not done. Jacob called next. His voice was a venomous parody of remorse. "Nat, I'm sorry. You know I didn't mean to hurt you. I just lost my temper. If you come back, I'll protect you. I'll keep Mom from bothering you. We can be a family again." My jaw ached at every syllable, not just from the swelling, but from the memory of his fist. His apology was not for me. It was bait. Elena recorded the call on her rig without a word. When it ended, she looked at me steadily. "That's not an apology. That's control disguised as mercy." Major Ross leaned forward, her tone sharp. This is classic gaslighting. They are reframing reality, rewriting the past, turning you into the unstable one. This will get worse before it gets better. You need to stay strong. It did get worse. 2 days later, Donna stood at a community fundraiser in Dallas, speaking to neighbors and church members. Photos surfaced on Facebook, her face mournful, her hand pressed to her heart as she spoke of her daughter's struggle with military stress. She wasn't just undermining me privately anymore. She was laying out a narrative, publicly creating sympathy for Jacob and herself while painting me as a fragile soldier cracking under pressure. The comments beneath the photos were exactly what she wanted. Poor Donna, what a burden to bear. That boy Jacob has had to shoulder so much responsibility. Not a word about the bruise that still painted my jaw yellow and blue. I sat in Elena's apartment scrolling through the feed, my hands trembling with rage. "They're erasing me," I whispered. Elena slammed the laptop shut. "No, they're trying to. But we're archiving everything. Every photo, every comment. They don't know they're building your case for you." Ross added, "A jury doesn't just listen to one story. They weigh credibility. And right now they're handing us proof of intent to discredit you. The gaslighting campaign wasn't just calculated. It was relentless. They knew where to hit." My phone buzzed with a message that made my blood run cold. It was from an unknown number, but the voice memo attached played Jacob's voice. "If you don't stop, I'll make sure nobody believes you. You'll be the crazy soldier, the unstable girl. That's all you'll ever be." The venom was raw, stripped of pretense. Elena copied the file onto her drives, her expression unreadable. Ross looked at me. "He just gave us threat and intent on record. We'll use it." I pressed my fingers against my temple, fighting the spiral of doubt. For years, they had trained me to question myself, to wonder if I was too sensitive, too weak. But here, with Elena's relentless pragmatism and Ross's legal steel, I felt the fog lifting. Each lie they told became a brick in my defense. Each manipulation was not my weakness, but their pattern of abuse displayed for all to see. Still, the emotional toll was heavy. Late one night, after cataloging another email chain in which Donna begged me to stop embarrassing the family, I broke down. The tears came hot and fast, my body shaking with exhaustion. "Maybe they're right," I whispered. "Maybe I am the problem." Elena crouched in front of me, gripping my hands hard enough to anchor me. "No, Nat, listen to me. You are not the problem. You are the evidence. They are terrified of you because you can't be controlled anymore." Her words steadied me like a soldier's command. Ross added softly, "The hardest battle isn't proving the truth. It's surviving their attempts to erase it. But you are surviving. Every day you stand, you win." That night, I dreamed of the Carter house, its walls lined with Jacob's trophies, Donna's voice echoing down the halls. But when I woke, I realized the walls no longer felt impenetrable. They were paper-thin and fragile, ready to collapse under the weight of truth. The war of narratives was brutal, but in their desperation, my family revealed themselves. They showed the world their tactics, gaslighting, manipulation threats disguised as love, and with every attempt they gave me more proof, more reason to fight. I was no longer a daughter begging to be believed. I was a soldier cataloging enemy intelligence. And this war was far from over. The first time I saw the flyer for the Dallas fundraiser, I thought it had to be a mistake. My mother's name printed in elegant script beneath the banner of a veterans charity Jacob listed as a guest speaker, their faces smiling in staged portraits. They were using my grandfather's name, his service, his legacy to raise money for a cause that didn't even exist. I stared at the screen in Elena's apartment, my hands shaking with fury. "They've crossed into theft," Elena muttered, her eyes scanning the event details. "This isn't just gaslighting anymore. This is fraud dressed as patriotism." Major Ross leaned over her shoulder, reading carefully. Her jaw tightened. "They're exploiting your grandfather's reputation and, by extension, yours. This is their biggest play yet, Natalie. They're trying to turn you into a footnote while they rewrite the story as heroes." The images burned in my mind, Jacob in a suit, Donna clutching a microphone, both of them standing beneath a banner that read, "The Robert Carter Memorial Fund." My grandfather had been a quiet man, a veteran who lived with dignity. To see his name hijacked like this was more than manipulation. It was desecration. I pressed my fists to my temples, the rage clawing up my throat. Enough, I whispered the word, shaking. He just crossed the last red line. My voice grew stronger, each syllable carved from steel. They took my future. They broke my body. Now they're dancing on my grandfather's grave. No more hiding. No more defense. It's time to go on the offensive. The room went still. Elena's fingers hovered over her keyboard. Ross's pen froze mid-scratch on her legal pad. They both looked at me waiting. For the first time since the night Jacob's fist crashed into my jaw, I felt calm. Cold, deliberate calm. I rose from the couch and walked to the map pinned on Elena's wall, a street map of Dallas with colored pushpins already marking key locations. I tapped the spot where the fundraiser would take place. "This is where it ends," I said. "In public, in their world of donors, cameras, and lies. I'll give them the stage they crave, then I'll take it from under them." Ross's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about exposure at the event itself." "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Every photo, every recording, every piece of evidence, we'll project it for everyone to see. No more whispers, no more cover-ups." Elena's grin was sharp, almost predatory. "I can get us in." "Event tech is sloppy. I'll slide someone in as an AV contractor. All I need is your signal." Ross was more cautious. "It's risky. If anything goes wrong, they'll spin it as a breakdown. But if it works—" She trailed off, calculating. "If it works, it's undeniable." The breaking point wasn't just about the fundraiser. It was about me. For years, I had been the silent soldier in my own family, absorbing the blows, swallowing the words, keeping the peace. But peace had never been real. Tonight, staring at the proof of their fraud, I felt the last thread snap. I was no longer the girl begging for recognition. I was a soldier declaring war. That night, I barely slept. The rage hummed under my skin, keeping me awake as Elena's computer fans whirred in the dark. I thought about every insult, every bruise, every stolen moment of pride. Jacob's laugh when he burned my West Point letter. Donna's voice telling me not to bleed on the rug. My father's silence echoing louder than any word. Each memory was a weapon they had tried to use against me. Now those same weapons would become my arsenal. At dawn, I stepped outside onto Elena's small balcony. The Austin sky was pale blue, streaked with the promise of heat. I breathed deeply, the air sharp in my lungs, and whispered to myself, "You're not their victim anymore." When I came back inside, Elena handed me a mug of coffee and raised an eyebrow. "So, soldier, what's the plan?" I met her gaze. "We build it like an operation. H-Hour will be at the Dallas Museum of Art. That's where they'll be at their most arrogant, their most exposed. We hit them there." Ross joined us later that morning, her briefcase clicking open with authority. She spread documents across the table, restraining order drafts, potential charges, notes from conversations with Captain Hayes. "We'll need more than emotion," she said. "We'll need corroboration. Other witnesses, other soldiers. People they've hurt indirectly." Elena's fingers danced across her keyboard, already in motion. There's chatter in the veteran forums about shady dealings connected to Jacob. "I'll dig." I sat between them, the frozen peas long melted in my towel, my jaw stiff but healing. For the first time, the pain wasn't just physical, it was a reminder. Every throb said, "Remember why you're fighting." That evening, I wrote in my notebook a habit from deployment. At the top, I scrawled in block letters, "Operation Reveal." Beneath it, bullet points formed evidence log. Photo archive, audio threats, Donna's emails, Jacob's calls, album letter, public display, secure AV infiltration, legal counsel present, military police on standby. My handwriting was jagged but firm, a battle plan taking shape. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, we had the skeleton of a strategy. Elena would secure the tech access. Ross would coordinate with JAG to ensure military police presence. My role was both bait and executioner, the daughter on display, the soldier who would flip the stage. When I finally closed my notebook, exhaustion hit me like a tidal wave. But underneath it was something new. Not despair, not doubt. Purpose. My family thought they had written the final chapter when Jacob's fist broke my jaw. They were wrong. That was only the prologue. The real story would be written in Dallas in front of cameras, donors, and strangers who would witness the truth. The breaking point wasn't just a moment, it was a transformation. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was marching straight into enemy territory not to survive, but to win. And for the first time in my life, I knew the battlefield was mine. The Dallas Museum of Art smelled of lacquer and perfume, a soft antiseptic that could not hide the electricity in the air. Chandeliers scattered light across a sea of tuxedos and gowns, cameras waited on pedestals like birds, ready to take flight, and donors leaned forward in their seats as if by sheer posture they could command the course of history. My heart hammered a steady cadence against my ribs as I moved through the crowd with my parents flanking me, Donna radiant in a sequined dress, Jacob in a tailored suit with a grin practiced for the cameras. They paraded me as their proud soldier daughter, the prop they had rehearsed for months. The lights felt hot enough to strip away whatever thin skin of confidence I had left, but underneath the glow, I was steady. I had rehearsed this walk 1,000 times in my head. Every step was measured. Every breath was deliberate. Elena had tucked a paper with the signal into my palm earlier that night. "Thank you, Father." I would say those words, and then the feed would begin. The AV tech, the one Elena had slipped in under a contractor badge, strode confidently toward the control room with a slate tucked under his arm. He would be the hand on the remote when the world needed to see what had happened to me. My role was simple and terrifying: be the daughter the room expected speak words that would lay the bait, and then let the truth unfold like a swarm of bees. I felt the weight of Major Ross's nod at the side of the stage like a command given and accepted. Captain Hayes was in the wings, his face unreadable, but I knew he had arranged for the military police to stand by. We had rehearsed contingencies, legal language, and extraction routes until every possible failure had been anticipated. Yet anticipation did not still the tremor under my skin. It made it purposeful. When the program reached the segment about family and legacy, the lights dimmed. Jacob rose to thunderous applause and took the stage with the kind of practiced ease men in politics perfected. He spoke of sacrifice of veterans, of the duty to honor a soldier's memory, and he wove my grandfather's name into a tapestry of patriotism that made the audience lean forward, hands already reaching for their checkbooks. Donna's eyes glittered with pride as she squeezed my hand and gave me a little smile that felt like a lie. They wanted the cameras on him, the lenses fixed on his righteous posture, the applause swelling like a wave at his feet. That was the moment Elena and the tech had chosen. My throat tightened. I felt the signal paper crumple under my fingers. On stage, Jacob pivoted and said in a voice meant to slice, "Now I'd like to invite my daughter to join me so she can speak about the family's commitment to service." A roar of approval followed precisely the soundtrack he expected. I rose with them and walked forward, each step echoing louder than the last, feeling the crowd's attention funnel down into a single pointed beam that made my face hot. I climbed the steps and stood at the podium next to him, the microphone cold under my palm. Jacob leaned in close and murmured a rehearsed line into my ear, a temptation to play the good daughter, "Say what we gave you. Be grateful." He smiled the kind of smile that had been flung at birthday photos and then gone the moment the flash cooled. I placed my hands on the lectern, glanced at the rows of faces reflected in the glass, and for a heartbeat the room was a pool of expectant light. I cleared my throat, and for a second the soldier training and the girl from Waco balanced like two halves of a bridge. "Thank you, Father," I said. The engineered hush the tech wanted settled in like a cloak. That was the signal. On cue, the massive projection screens that had been displaying the Memorial Fund's logo blinked. For a breath, the images were just the glossy emblem, and then the feed cut, and the first photograph filled the screen. My face that night swollen and marred, the bruise purpling like a violent moon. Gasps rolled across the room like a swell of wind. Flashbulbs popped in a staccato, cameras pivoted, and the clinking of glasses stuttered to silence. The photo was followed by another angle, then footage shot on my phone, my own voice flat and steady, as I recited times, locations, the details. The intimacy of the bathroom lighting in the footage made the staged polish of the gala look suddenly false. I watched as expressions shifted from curiosity to shock to disbelief. Jacob's face lost color like paint left in the rain, his composure cracking in real time. Donna's hand flew to her mouth, but her eyes searched for rescue more than remorse. On the speakers, my recorded voice continued. Private First Class Natalie Carter, 2,100 hours assaulted by Jacob Carter inside the family residence. The microphone magnified my words and spilled them into the hall where they would become impossible to ignore. A murmur threaded through the crowd, then a loud, disbelieving whisper turned to chatter to outrage. The donors who had leaned forward now leaned back as if those rehearsed chairs could keep them safe from truth. Then the screen cut to audio. It was raw and unedited. Jacob's voice clipped and unvarnished, threatening me in a way he had not cloaked when the cameras were not on. "Don't make me do things we'll both regret," he had said in one of the calls, his voice a snarl I could never unhear. The room changed dimension. People who had come for an evening of philanthropy were suddenly witnessing a family fracture exposed under a spotlight. Some faces turned toward each other in incredulous refusal. Others set their jaws as if to guard the fragile reputation they had been sold. Photographers moved like predators capturing the exact moment a dynasty cracked. I felt something loosen and then collapse inside me. The release was both terrifying and cathartic. The tactical ballet we had rehearsed began to unfold with brutal efficiency. From a side entrance, a small group of military police moved into the crowd, not as caricatures of authority, but with a quiet professionalism that cut through the hysteria. Major Ross stepped forward, her voice ringing with authority as she announced that an investigation was underway. She read from paper to make the words official. A complaint had been filed, an assault was alleged, and the Army would not tolerate reprisals against one of its soldiers. The cameras pounced on her the way a pack senses blood. Journalists shouted questions, voices overlapping in a chorus that made the chandeliers shiver. Jacob stumbled backward as colleagues and patrons stared. He reached for Donna, who was already swaying the paleness of someone stripped of performance. I watched my brother's face crumble, the practiced mask shattered, revealing fear, confusion, and a sliver of recognition of the consequences he had never expected to meet so publicly. Then, everything accelerated. 2 military police in uniform approached the stage and read the rights in a voice designed to both formalize and silence. They placed a hand on Jacob's arm, and the cameras traced the gesture like a slow-motion reveal. The guards led him to the edge of the platform, where a line of officers escorted him off stage. He turned once toward me, eyes pleading with a question that had no language. "How could you—" Donna collapsed into a chair, weeping theatrical and real in ways that made my stomach tighten. My chest filled with a fierce vindication that wept at the sight of her tears. The audience erupted into chaos, some shouting for explanation, some offering support. It was a messy human uproar unspooled before every lens that would carry the image worldwide. Amid the chaos, a crazy quiet settled in my chest. The adrenaline that had driven me up the stairs ebbed into a stunned exhaustion. The victory was public and ugly and uncompromising. My plan had worked. The truth had been broadcast into the very salons and living rooms that had once lauded Jacob. Yet when the first wave of relief washed over me, it came hand in hand with a hollow I had not expected. There was no dramatic repentance from Donna, no unraveling confession from my father. Instead, there was a scramble for narrative control. His lawyers arrived a flurry of rehearsed outrage and claims of misunderstanding. The attendees whispered into phones and watched as producers began to spin the evening for the networks. The feed had been hijacked by facts, but the world would debate motive and context and nuance for days. As the MPs led Jacob away, I felt eyes on me, some filled with praise, others with suspicion. A woman near the front reached up, touched my hand, and said, "You were brave." A man snapped a photo and shouted, "This will change everything." The words stung with truth and with the knowledge that headlines were already being drafted. Reporters swarmed toward Major Ross, who stood like a lighthouse through the storm, and answered questions with a measured voice that made the legal implications clear. Captain Hayes moved beside me and gave me a brief nod, his presence a reminder of the Army's steady spine. Elena slipped into the crowd unseen, the technician's job done. She found me later by a side door, her face exhausted and triumphant, and when our eyes met, the only words we needed were said with a look. We did it. The aftermath was rearranged in minutes into 1,000 micro-dramas. Donna's supporters railed that the family had been besieged by a vengeful daughter, hungry for attention. Others condemned her complicity with brutal clarity. The museum manager stood on a riser thanking the police for their professionalism and begging for calm. Photographers chased Jacob's cuffs like gold, and each click of the shutter felt like a nail hammered into the coffin of his public life. My brother's face on the evening news looked small and terrified and infuriatingly ordinary. I realized then that the man who had once wielded his family's love as a shield was now walking into a cell of consequences he had never imagined would touch him. When the dust settled and the legal forms had been exchanged, Major Ross guided me off the stage past clusters of murmuring guests to a quiet room behind the museum. My legs trembled as if the ground still rocked beneath me. I sank into a chair and for a long while said nothing. The applause and outrage and the flashbulbs filtered through the closed door like memories of someone else's life. Captain Hayes sat across from me, and for a moment we simply looked at each other in shared silence. Then he placed a hand over mine and said, "You did the right thing." The words were small and exact, and they lodged in me like a salve. Outside, the world was already erupting in interpretations. Twitter threads spiraled, op-ed pieces blossomed like fevered flowers, and news anchors parsed every frame for tone and motive. We had won the battle of exposure, but the war for meaning had only begun. Yet in the quiet room with the dye of the gala still clinging to my dress and the ghost of my brother's threat echoing in my ears, I felt a strange peace. The truth had been aired. The public had seen what my family had tried to hide under trophies and ribboned albums. I had taken the stage and turned a private humiliation into a public reckoning. The victory was messy and incomplete and utterly necessary. I thought of the Persian rug in my childhood home, the one Donna loved more than the children who had lived on it, and I felt an unexpected release. It would bear the stain of that night forever, but it would also be witness. The world had watched, and now it would judge. The Dallas Gala was over, but its echo carried on for weeks, rattling through every news cycle, every social feed, every whispered phone call. The Carter name, once polished and preserved by Donna's vigilance, was now tarnished with headlines. Waco soldier exposes family abuse at gala. Carter's son arrested amid assault allegations. When family loyalty turns violent. My face appeared beside my brother's mugshot, my uniform contrasted against his crumbling smirk. The story was no longer mine alone. It had been absorbed into the wider conversation of power silence and what happens when truth refuses to stay buried. At first, the reaction was split like a wound. Half of Texas hailed me as a survivor, a soldier who had stood her ground when even her blood had turned against her. The other half condemned me as a traitor to family values, a young woman who had humiliated her own kin on the grandest stage. The weight of public judgment pressed down on me in ways I had never experienced. Walking down the streets of Austin, I heard whispers, saw people glance twice, some with nods of respect, others with narrowed eyes. Even grocery store clerks paused when they saw my debit card, Carter printed on the plastic like a scar I couldn't erase. But the Army was different. Where my family sought to erase me, my chain of command stood firm. Captain Hayes made it clear in briefings and private words that the institution would not abandon one of its own. Major Ross guided the case with surgical precision, filing charges, securing protective orders, and ensuring every shred of evidence was logged properly. For once, I was not gaslit or doubted. I was believed protected and treated as someone whose service mattered. That alone was healing. Jacob remained in Dallas County Jail awaiting trial, his once arrogant posture now slouched in courtroom sketches that circulated online. Donna's appearances at his hearings were theatrical, dressed in black, clutching tissues telling reporters she still loved both her children. But behind the tears was fury. She left voicemails on my phone alternating between pleading and threats. "Natalie, stop this madness. Families don't do this to each other. You'll regret destroying us." I let each one play recorded and saved them, then pressed delete. The sound of her voice no longer cut me. It simply reminded me of the chains I had already broken. My father, Harold, true to form, remained absent. He offered no calls, no statements, no gestures. His silence was the same as it had always been, an empty room that echoed when I needed him most. That, too, became part of my healing, realizing I could no longer wait for love that would never arrive. Weeks after the gala, I made the choice to return to Waco one final time. Not to the house itself, I had no intention of stepping into those walls again, but to the Brazos River that wound its slow curve past the town. In my hand, I carried the key to the Carter home, worn smooth from years of use. Standing on the bridge at sunset, I looked down at the water catching fire with orange light. The key felt heavy not from metal, but from memory. Every locked door, every slammed frame, every night I had retreated behind it, hoping to be safe, all pressed into that single piece. I held it up, once whispered, "You don't own me anymore," and let it fall. The splash was small, but the release was enormous. The current took it, carrying the past away. I walked back to my car lighter. Healing was not immediate. Some nights I woke gasping, Jacob's threats echoing in my head. Other nights I dreamed of Donna's cold eyes watching me bleed on the rug. But each morning I forced myself to rise, to lace my boots, to step into the role of soldier, not victim. My squad mates at Fort Hood, once distant acquaintances, became my family. They didn't ask invasive questions, but their silent acceptance, the way they made space for me at the table, meant more than words. Elena remained my rock-messy, caffeinated, sharp-tongued, reminding me constantly that survival was not enough. "You didn't fight this hard just to exist," she told me. "You fight so you can build something better." A year later, I stood on the parade ground at Fort Benning, Georgia, sunlight blazing off rows of pressed uniforms. My jaw, though healed, still twinged when the weather changed, a permanent reminder of the night everything broke. But now I wore the gold bar of a second lieutenant pinned proudly on my chest. The ceremony was crisp and formal, the kind of moment Jacob would have sneered at and Donna would have tried to steal. Yet in that crowd, I saw faces that mattered. Elena beaming, Captain Hayes standing stiff with pride, Major Ross in uniform, her nod sharp as ever. When my name was called, the applause rose steady and true. Not the hollow clapping of a family that never cared, but the recognition of a community that had chosen to believe me. After the ceremony, I spoke briefly not about myself, but about what the journey had cost and taught me. I told them that silence can be as violent as fists, that loyalty without respect is a cage, and that survival is only the beginning. My voice was steady, my words chosen like rounds of ammunition, deliberate, purposeful, meant to strike home. The crowd listened not out of obligation, but out of respect. That, I realized, was the healing I had sought. But healing is never only personal. I could not walk away knowing others were still trapped in their own Carter houses, silenced by fear and manipulation. With Ross's help, I filed the paperwork to create the Carter Survivors Fund, a foundation based in Austin dedicated to providing legal aid housing and mental health support for those escaping family violence. Naming it after the family that had tried to break me was not irony, it was reclamation. The Carter name would no longer stand for silence and cruelty. It would stand for resilience, for survival, for justice. The fund grew quickly, donations flooding in from veterans groups, civic organizations, and even strangers who had seen the gala footage. Survivors reached out with their stories, some whispered, some shouted, all echoes of mine. Each one reminded me why the fight mattered. The final step in healing came not in courtrooms or ceremonies, but in a small, stark room at Dallas County Jail. I had asked to see Jacob one last time, before sentencing, not for him, but for me. He shuffled in wearing prison orange, his once muscular frame softened, his eyes hollow. For a moment, I saw not the monster who had shattered my jaw, but the boy who had once raced me through the Waco fields. That boy had been devoured by entitlement and cruelty long ago, but a flicker remained. He smirked at first, trying to summon the old power. "Come to gloat?" he asked. I sat across from him, hands folded, my posture calm. "No," I said. "I came to tell you I forgive you." The words surprised him, his smirk faltering. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." He leaned back, eyes narrowing, searching for a weakness. There was none. I rose before he could reply and walked away, the sound of the door clinging shut behind me, sealing that chapter forever. Healing is not clean. It does not follow a straight line. But with each step I took away from that cell, from that family, I built a new story. A story where I was not the silenced daughter, but the soldier who chose to speak. A story where scars did not shame me, but marked my survival. A story that others could look at and whisper, if she fought, maybe I can too. One evening a year after the gala, as the Texas sun dipped low and my platoon finished a training run, I led them in cadence. My voice rose strong, calling the rhythm, and their voices answered in unison. The sound rolled across the field, a declaration that no matter the past, the future belonged to those who dared to claim it. As sweat ran down my spine and the horizon glowed with dawn's promise, I felt something I hadn't in years: peace. Your past doesn't write your future. You do.